Welcome to the Pensions Committee. Welcome to some new faces, and welcome back to some old faces. As this is my first gig in the convener's chair, if it all goes horribly wrong, I hope you'll cut me some slack and let me off due to inexperience. If it all goes smoothly, that will be thanks to the advice and guidance of officers. I will now then pass over to Stephanie Dunsmore to take us through the housekeeping.
Thank you, Convener. Aberdeen City Council has a no smoking policy. I haven't turned my camera on, apologies, having told everybody else to do it. Has a no smoking policy, and you're requested to refrain from smoking at all times whilst in the building. In the event of a fire or other emergency requiring our evacuation, we'll hear a single continuous tone klaxon. You should proceed immediately out of the building via the designated exit routes, which are out via the door through which we entered, head back to the main staircase and down to the ground floor. On exiting the building, we should proceed to the Arts Centre in Queen Street, where we'll wait until clearance is given to return to the building. The closest toilets are located in the corridor behind the lifts off the main stairwell, and it would also be appreciated if mobile phones could either be switched off or put on silent mode. For anyone with hearing difficulties, there is a hearing loop system in this room linked to the sound system if you wish to put your hearing aids to the T position. This is a hybrid meeting. We have some people in the chamber today and others participating remotely. Today's meeting is being recorded. Could I ask that all attendees switch off their camera and mute microphone when not speaking, but that both are switched on when you're invited to speak so that this is picked up on the recording? If those at home do wish to speak, could I ask that they please either use the raise hand function or indicate in the meeting chat. If they're having any issues with either of those, please just activate your camera and signal that you wish to speak. For those in the chamber, can I ask that you use your microphone when speaking and also ensure that you speak directly into it so that you're clear to those at home and for the recording. Can I also ask that if you have a laptop with you, that you turn on your camera when you're speaking in Teams so that those at home can see you. I'll now just take a quick roll call and would ask that members confirm their attendance when their name is called so that this is clear in the recording of the meeting and can also be recorded for the minute. Convener?
Here.
Vice Convener?
Here.
Councillor Alphonse?
Present.
Councillor Clark?
Present.
Councillor Crockett? Councillor Cross?
Present.
Councillor Davidson?
Present.
Councillor Henriksson?
Present.
Councillor Malik?
Present.
Councillor Massey?
Present.
Councillor McRae?
Present.
Councillor Stewart?
I'm here.
Councillor Teixeira?
Present.
Councillor Copeland?
Present.
Councillor Smith?
Here.
Mr. Hodgson?
Here.
Mrs. Lawrence?
Here.
Mr. Sterling?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Here.
And Mr. Walters.
Here.
Thank you, Convener.
Thanks, Steph. So item 1, notification of urgent business. We don't have any urgent business. Item 2, determination of exempt business. Can we all agree that items 11.1 and 11.2 can be taken in private? Thank you. Declarations of interest and transparency statements. Has anyone got anything to declare? Not seeing any hands. Which brings us to minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 25th of March. This is really for noting, and I don't think there are any outstanding actions, but I'll just go through page by page just to check that folk are happy. So page 5 in the pack, everyone happy with that? Page 6. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. And page 10. Oh, and page 11. Page 12. Which brings us on to the business planner. Anyone have any questions on the business planner? Nope, not seeing any hands. That then takes us to the internal audit report. So on this one, I'll pass over to Mr. Dale to see if he's got anything he wants to highlight for us.
Thank you, convener. So public sector internal audit standards require that internal audit produce an annual report and give an opinion on the fund's framework of governance, risk management and control. This report satisfies that requirement. However, I hope you'll see from the level of detail in the report I've taken this further. So not only does the report give the committee my opinion, also provides an overview of the key findings from our work in the previous year, where we are in terms of outstanding audit recommendations and other relevant updates for the committee. The report is also forward-looking and provides an overview of the areas we expect to focus on in the coming year, the work we'll be doing to support management in closing off audit recommendations, and also the work we've done to make sure that our methodology is the best it can be for the fund. I don't intend to cover off each section of the report, but if I could provide some commentary on a few sections and then welcome any questions from the committee. For me, the first thing to highlight and the real positive of the report is that, in my opinion, the fund had an adequate and effective framework of governance, risk management and control for the year ended 31st of March 2022. This opinion is not just based on the audits we've concluded in the year, but also other assurances taken from wider areas, and I'd ask that the committee focus on this. This includes our work up to the date of the report, our follow-up work, a review of reports from other assurance providers, and a host of other information that comes from us being embedded within the council. The report also provides the in-year position in terms of outstanding audit recommendations. And I would just like to flag, though, at the next committee, you'll present a full report on audit recommendations follow-up. This will provide details of the current work with management on outstanding recommendations, the outputs of the exercise, those recommendations we've closed, and those that remain open. However, if I could just flag, audit recommendations closure has never been an issue for the pension fund, and speaking with management is something they actively work on and monitor. The report also provides an update on our performance over the past year. And finally, from me, the public sector internal audit standards require that the annual report must also include a statement on the conformance with the standards themselves and the results of any quality assurance and improvement work. And I'm pleased to confirm to the committee that following an internal assessment, internal audit are fully compliant with the standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. Any questions for Mr. Dale or officers? Not seeing any hands, so in that case, can we go to, can we agree the recommendations? Which brings us on to 8.1, the unaudited annual report and accounts. And it's over to Mr. Belford.
Apologies, convener. I pressed the wrong button there. I'm delighted to be able to present the unaudited accounts to the committee and the board in relation to financial year 21-22. A massive amount of work has gone into preparing this to the statutory deadlines, which again we meet, which is very, very grateful to the staff, particularly Mr. Scroggy and his team. In terms of pulling this all together. It does show the position of the pension funds, both the transport fund and the main fund, at the end of the financial year, and what has been a particularly bumpy ride in terms of overall asset values. But it is encouraging to end the year in the main fund with an increase in the value of the fund. And that's reflected in the accounts. What I would draw to attention is obviously the statement made by Mr. Dale just a moment ago in terms of the compliance, the assurance and the opinion that he has in terms of our internal controls environment, and that supports the annual governance statement that's included as part of the annual accounts. An important aspect of our business that makes sure that we continue to govern and make sure that the decision-making and processes that we have in place are adequate, suitable and effective in the way in which they perform. It is a huge document in terms of the content of that. I don't propose to go into all the individual statements, but happy to take questions along with colleagues if there are any in particular, but present these draft accounts, which will then be presented to, published for public inspection prior to the conclusion of the audit, when our external auditors, Audit Scotland, will form their opinion and come back to the committee in due course, which is scheduled for the autumn. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Mr. Belford, and thank you and all the staff for the very enormous amount of hard work that's gone into preparing these. Do members have any questions? I'm not seeing any hands raised, so in which case can we note the report? Thank you. That brings us on to item 9.1, the funding strategy statement. Is Claire Mullin wanting to say something to draw our attention to?
Thank you, Convener. This is just a report to bring the draft funding strategy statement to committee. It has been redrafted as a result of new regulations coming in June that allows more flexibilities for the fund around exiting employers. It's also been amended to allow for wording around different investment strategies as a risk management tool. And as I said, there's no financial implications of this new funding strategy statement. We'll get a new draft one of that for when the 2023 valuation comes about. So this is just wording to include for deferred debt arrangements and flexibilities. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks for that. Any questions? Again, not seeing any hands waved. So in which case can we approve?
Oh, sorry, Mr. Hodgson's got his hand.
Sorry. Mr. Hodgson.
Thank you. I think I'm happy with the. I'm happy with the new statement, the document that's there. I guess if we're bringing in the sort of different investment buckets as options for employers, I was just wondering what the process is here for engaging with employers to effectively put them into buckets, or is the intention that everyone will carry on in their existing investment strategy unless they kind of approach the fund and ask otherwise?
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Hodgson, yes, you're right that everybody will remain in what we call the standard bucket until they approach the fund around exit or anything like that. So it's really just to put that methodology in place for the next valuation, and we can use it going forward.
Thanks.
And apologies to Mr. Hodgson for not spotting you in the first instance. Any further questions? Not seeing any, in which case can we approve the draft funding statement? Thank you very much, which brings us on to item 10.1, strategy, in which point I'll pass over to Laura Collis.
Thank you, Convener. This is the usual strategy report that we bring to committee. It covers all the areas of the pension fund. I don't propose to go through it. There's items around procurement updates and so on. So I'm happy to take questions. We do have a revised authorised signatory list to bring to committee also, and there is an amendment to that list that we need to. I think you, Convener, you were going to mention that.
Yes, sorry, I'm a bit distracted there. Yeah, we have a slight amendment. We very rarely have, for new members, we very rarely have amendments at Pensions Committee, but we've got a small one which is simply at the end of recommendation 2.2 to add the fact that it's subject to Ross Campbell being identified as team leader property. He's currently been acting, but is now permanent. So congratulations to Ross. That's the only amendment we've got. Are members content with that? Oh, I believe Councillor Stewart is wanting to come in.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a question just for clarification. It comes under the benefit of administration on page 249, because I've got a hard copy here. And I really just wanted, when it's talking about the changes to survivor benefits will count as a material alteration under the occupational personal pension scheme, and that recipients will be notified hopefully by the end of August, the 31st of August. So how many people is that you're going to have to notify? I mean, if you need to come back to me, that's okay, but I just wondered, you know, how many people that actually is. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have to come back to you on that one. I don't have a number off the top of my head at the moment, I'm afraid.
That's fine. Thank you, convener. I anticipate that's going to be quite a big number.
Well, let us come back to you on that.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Any further questions? Oh, Mr. Hodgson.
Hi, thanks. Couple of questions on the risk register, if I may. The first one is, I think I asked this last time about COVID and whether that continues to be a risk as such. Certainly, different governments have different viewpoints, but I think restrictions have been lifted. So I wonder whether that should be a more generic risk about kind of, you know, illness, global disease. What do we have? We've had monkeypox and polio and all the rest of it now. So I wonder whether that kind of could be umbrella-ized.
Yes, I mean, we have reduced the risk of COVID on the risk register this time around, and we'll continue to monitor that and maybe even remove it in the future. Yeah,
thanks. The other one that I had was maybe not necessarily a question for the risk register, so perhaps something we can pick up later. But we've got pay and price inflation as being a high risk. I think that the benefits of the fund are fully inflation linked, and so with CPI inflation expected to be 10, 11, 12% in September, interested to understand what impact that's having on the fund in terms of benefits, but also what it's doing to the investments. Obviously, we've seen kind of crazy investment markets over the first, well, over 6 months of this year. So interested to pick that up.
Inflation, yeah. Well, we could discuss what it does with the investments when we reach the investment report, performance report. Inflation, when it comes to the main fund and both funds on the liability side, we will see what inflation is at September, because what the inflation numbers are at September then goes on to being the pensions increase in April. And if that is significantly high come September or the end of September, and we'll see that number being provided by government probably October, November time. That will obviously affect if it's in the 9-10% area. That's quite a large pensions increase for the fund to deliver, and it will obviously be part of our actuarial valuation come March next year, and the actuary will take that into account. And we obviously have to deliver that pension increase. With the funds in a very healthy surplus position at the moment, so there is room there to manage that increase, but obviously it's not necessarily sustainable if it continues for a number of years. But the main issue is at the moment on the liabilities is that September number, and we'll have to wait and see what that outcome is.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Is that okay, Mr. Hodgson? Thanks. Councillor Stewart, I can see your hand raised. Is that a legacy hand from before, or do you want to come back in again?
It's a legacy and I can't get it to go down. I apologise. I'm pressing away, but thank you anyway.
That's okay. It happens to all of us from time to time. Mr. Sterling, I think, has got a question.
Yeah, I have a question on the administration strategy. to do with the PLO statements, which we're sitting at 46%. And I think we have been for quite a while. I'm just wondering, is this a concern, and is there a drive to increase this number and get that percentage up?
I can take that one. Just give me a second till I put the camera on. Thank you, Mr. Shirling. Yeah, the PLO statement is in relation to the pensions liaison officer. It's basically a contact with each employer, and it's a little bit outdated if I'm honest. We've now got obviously the employer relationship team, and we carry out a contact review each year with our employers to ensure that we're speaking to the right people about the right things. The pensions administration strategy itself is currently being reviewed, and we're hoping to take a new document to committee in September, and obviously there'll be a new report as part of that as well, and that part will come out of it, and we'll talk more about employer engagement as a whole instead of identifying where we hold statements for liaison officers.
Right, thanks very much for that.
Any further questions? In which case, can we approve the recommendations subject to the slight change on 2.2? Thank you. That brings us on to 10.2, which is the training report. And again, I'll pass over to Laura Collis.
Here we go. Camera and microphone. Right. This is the training report and training policy that we bring to the committee on an annual basis, providing details of training requirements and training opportunities. And happy to take questions.
Any questions? Councillor Henrickson.
Thank you, convener. Having looked through the report, the attendance and people that have actually achieved training and have actually worked to do the training, I just wondered what would be the situation if there was, what time limit there would be on ensuring that people actually completed the training that's required, and what measures would be taken if they hadn't completed the training?
Yes, so we do recommend that there is an amount of training that is required. There is regulations around training that the expectations are that if you sit on the committee and sit on the board, that you have the enough and relevant experience and knowledge to be able to challenge the information that's put in front of you. We have added to the training opportunities with the Hyman's online training portal, and we have made suggestions that that is done within a reasonable time period. We obviously can't force yourselves to do the training, but if you don't, then you will get challenged at some point. But certainly, as a committee and a board, will be challenged, and a fund will be challenged by auditors. Because there is that expectation that you need to have that knowledge to be able to sit on the committee. But like I said, we can't force you to do the training. But at the end of the day, if you're not prepared to commit to acquiring that knowledge and experience, then we will have to be addressed at some point.
Thank you. I just want further.
Sorry, that would obviously come into the forms of perhaps having to remove yourselves from the committee or the board.
Thank you, convener. Just one further question regarding the Hyman's training. Any indication of when that's going to be available for members to start working on?
Yeah, we've just finalised the legal side of things, and I'm providing them with a list of everyone that needs licenses. So they anticipate it'll take about 5 days to get that set up for everyone. So hopefully should be in touch shortly.
Thanks for that. Any further questions from anyone? Not seeing any hands. Okay, I have a slight amendment to the recommendations, which Ms Dunsmore will circulate now. Has everybody yet received that? If anybody hasn't, can you wave?
Yeah, not me, sorry. Oh, maybe got it now.
Do folk want 5 minutes just to digest it?
Convener, can I ask a question, please?
Yes, of course.
Are you proposing that all the training would happen in Aberdeen? Is that what you're saying? And is it possible that everyone can come to Aberdeen? I'm just wanting to clarify.
Thanks for the question. No, I'm not proposing that all the training is always in Aberdeen. In the paper, you'll see there are references to a number of conferences, which one of which is the Local Government Chronicle Conference on Pensions. That's typically been held in Edinburgh. In the past, COSLA have run pensions seminars at their offices at Haymarket in Edinburgh. So when something is being organised by a third party, and the event is somewhere else, you either don't go or you travel. So I'm not. It's not saying we shouldn't ever travel. It's simply where there is an event that we ourselves are organising, we could organise it and hold it here, and either ask people to come to Aberdeen and show them the delights of our city, or else do the training online.
Thank you. What I'm trying to clarify then is what you're proposing is the training that normally happened or has in the past happened in London, and you're proposing that it would happen in Aberdeen, and that's great to reduce air miles. I'm just wondering if it is possible that those in London will be able to come to Aberdeen. So are you proposing something that is doable? That's what I'm asking. Or that you believe to be doable. I'm sure you would put something on the table if you didn't think it's going to happen, but obviously have we checked it out that that's going to work? That's all really.
No, I wouldn't propose it if I didn't think it was doable. It's certainly true that a lot of fund managers are based in London, but actually Scotland has a thriving financial services sector. One of our biggest fund managers is Baillie Gifford, who are based in Edinburgh, headquartered in Edinburgh. We also have, for example, Aberdeen Standard, who's, well, there's a clue in the name as to where they're based. So we have had London fund managers come up to give us training in the past, but some may be based in Scotland. But I say equally, we can do things online. Most of the training for new and returning members over the last 4 or 5 weeks has been done via Teams. I think Mr. Belford has done about 4 sessions on finance, so I think that demonstrates that you can do things online quite successfully.
Convener, just to add to that, I think what I would want to clarify is that the shape and the structure of the meeting that would normally take place in London would not be the same. I wouldn't expect it to be perhaps the same here in Aberdeen, we'd need to do something different in terms of how it works and perhaps how it's organised. So that would be the only difference, but it would have to adapt to being that situation.
Thanks for that, Mr. Belford. Councillor Malik, you had a question?
Thanks very much, Convener. So basically, you're suggesting that we are okay to go to Edinburgh, but we are actually reluctant to go to London for our training, which is very important training for us. In our last session in London, we had about 36 representatives or fund manager from the various company. Can you give us guarantee that all of they will turn up in Aberdeen, give us training while it is over requirement? We have to get training. It's impossible that the 36 representative will turn up in Aberdeen.
Thank you, Councillor Malik. In terms of the issue about travelling to Edinburgh or travelling to London, the reason for travel, I cited the example of travelling to Edinburgh, is that it's an event being organised by a third party, and that's where it's being held. The London session is something that we organised ourselves. So if we're organising something ourselves, we have a choice as to where it's held, and we need to take cognizance of the cost of travel, of the cost of putting up the committee for a couple of nights in a hotel, and also the carbon footprint in terms of the flying down to London. In terms of who's going to turn up, we can invite them. These people are entrusted with huge sums of our money and therefore would like our business. And I would imagine that most of them would come. Equally, however, if some of the training is delivered online rather than in person, that's fine, because you can do training online. Any more questions? Yeah. Oh, sorry, Councillor Malik, do we come back?
Thanks very much, Convener. Can I ask a question to our officer? If we travel to London, is a finances issue that we have to pay for the cost?
The committee's travel and the board members' travel to London for things that we're organising is our cost.
Convener, my hand is up. I don't know if you're seeing it.
Sorry, Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. So, in light of what Mr. Belford has just said, in the report, unless this is something else, when it talks about the financial implications at 4.1, it says training costs will be met by the pension fund. So, is that not possible? Are you sort of changing that? I'm also thinking about, would this damage relationships with the fund holders, or, you know what, or I would hope this wasn't, oh, we just don't want to go to London kind of thing, as in Scotland and England. I would hope it's not that. You're smiling. You're smiling.
Very much not the case, Councillor Stewart. In fact, since both my kids work in London, a trip to London paid for by somebody else would be quite handy, because it'll give me the chance to catch up with them, but that's not really the point.
You wouldn't, because you'd be doing all the training, but anyway, thank you. Okay, I'm not sure about that. I wonder what actually the officers think about what you're proposing. And maybe we could go back to Mr. Belford in the sense that he said we would have to make some changes. I'm not sure what those changes to the training would be. If it's possible to put that to Mr. Belford, thank you.
Convener, we haven't worked that up in terms of the level of detail. What it looks like, there are proposals within the report that we could offer a slightly different approach to training in terms of training sessions that follow on from the committees, for example. But in terms of immersing, and the point that the officers were making in terms of making the recommendation in the first instance was, we're looking for an immersive experience. We just haven't spoken to all of our fund managers in terms of what that could look like in Aberdeen. It takes a huge amount of planning and coordination anyway. We wouldn't expect that to be any less for Aberdeen, but it certainly perhaps will need to feel and look different in terms of how we organise it, the timing of when that's organised, and so on. But clearly there's a lot of conversations to have and to happen in order to make those changes.
Can I just to comment on the cost questions. The pension fund is pays for itself. It has no cost to the administering authority. So any travel costs involved with training, the pension fund pays for that directly. So that there is no cost to the council for the pension fund's administering costs.
Any further questions?
Yeah, thanks, convener. It's Jennifer here again. In light of that, and that's exactly what I thought, because that was the first point that I said at 4.1 in the report. And the officer has just actually said to us, Laura Collis, that there's no cost to the council. So if there's no cost to the council, why are we making this change? I'm just, I'm not clear why unless it's just change for change's sake, but it won't actually be saving us money. So I'm not clear.
There's no cost to the council, but there is a cost to the fund. Mr. Hodgson's wanting to come in, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I guess from my perspective, somebody somewhere is paying for travel and hotels and things. So if we can do it in a more cost-effective way and effectively make the managers pay for the flights, they'll sweep that in their business development budget and won't even notice it in the context of what they do. And actually, if it is coming from the fund, then I'm probably more paternalistic, because that's the money that's set aside to pay for pensions. So I think we need to be more conscious of that than we do if it's kind of council budget money, if I'm completely honest, because that's money that's set aside for people's retirement.
Thanks for that contribution. Any further questions for clarification?
Mr. Sterling.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's me
Mr.
again.
Sterling.
Oh, sorry.
Can I just bring Mr. Sterling in first?
Thanks, convener. I just wanted to associate myself with the comments from Mr. Hodgson about its members' money, and it's there to pay pensions.
Thanks for that, Mr. Sterling. I completely agree with you on that. Councillor Stewart, do you have anything further that you wanted to add?
Yes, please. Thank you. In light of what's been said, and I don't disagree with what you're saying about the money coming out of the pension fund. I don't actually disagree with that. But what I would like to see is how much the cost of this one-off annual training would be in relation to the pension fund. So, is it £1,000, £10,000? So it'd be really helpful, even if it's just based on last year's figures and how that would actually affect the pension fund. So in terms of the travel and so on.
The cost of the travel is peanuts in the wider scheme of things, to be absolutely honest, but that's not the point. It's still pensioners' money. Excuse me, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Stewart, I'm convening this meeting.
You're going to bully it. Okay, fine.
I'd be grateful if you didn't talk over the convener, Councillor Stewart.
You didn't let me finish, and you didn't allow me to have the answer to my question, which as an elected member with good governance, I'm allowed to have. Thank you.
Councillor Malik, you wanted to come in one more time.
Thanks very much, convener. I think, yes, we understand you are convener, and you have to respect member as well. They are elected member, and if the elected member is asking a question, and you cannot stop him, because Councillor Stewart was asking a question and you intervened 3-4 times. She was asking right and valid question. It is her right. Yes, you are convener. We have done this one, and Councillor Crocker convened for a long time, myself as well, and we respect and we understand what is the way to convene the meeting. But I don't think this is the proper way, the way you are actually shouting at Councillor Stewart. I do not actually accept this one at all. Number one. Number two, of course, can we ask a final question from officer? What percentage of the fund we are actually paying for this training? And this training is important for all of the members. And I am sure all of these representatives from various company will not turn up in Aberdeen.
Thank you for that contribution, Councillor Malik. I actually did answer Councillor Stewart's question about the costs, which I said was peanuts in the wider scheme of things. We're not going to get the precise figure as it is. I'm now going to move the motion. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Henriksson.
Thank you, convener. I'm more than happy to second your motion.
I think we've probably done this to death in terms of the question and answer session, but does anyone want to come in to, does they want to move anything different?
I would like to move the officer recommendation.
I can
Do you have a
second
seconder?
that. I can second it.
Councillor Stewart. You can come out to it.
As I say, I think we've kind of covered all the things around this issue in the question and answer session. So I don't see much further point for any other debate unless anyone wants to come in.
With respect, convener, it's not a matter for you to decide whether there's debate.
No, Councillor Crockett, I'm always saying that I was inviting anyone who wanted to make a contribution to make a contribution. I'm certainly not stifling the debate.
I hadn't appreciated that you had finished your moving, but I will speak to my amendment, Councillor.
I will formally move the motion, and then you can come in, Councillor Crockett. I'll formally move the motion. As I say, we've discussed this issue at length in the Q&A, where I've given people some leeway to ask questions and to make comments in terms of clarifying. So I will move the motion formally.
Thank you. I think that...
Sorry, Councillor Crockett. I just want to bring in Councillor Henriksson formally to second me.
Yes, no.
Thank you, convener. Only too happy to second the motion. I think what we have here is we're looking at the way that things are going. We have a budgetary responsibility to look into the funding for the pensions committee, and it is the members' money. If we can find a way to take the responsibility of funding training and reducing that, I only think it's a very, very good thing. One of the other things that we have is that all through the time in the pensions, we've been looking to reduce our carbon footprint within the funds that we're actually looking at. However, if we're not doing that, then it does send out a poor message. It's interesting that we've not had this training set. I've not been down to London since I've served on the committee. And I've attended plenty of training online. And if we can get the fund managers to come up, I do see that as a way forward. Thank you, convener.
Thank you, Councillor Henriksson. Councillor Crockett.
Thank you, convener, and thanks for the second. I think that this is not a new discussion. We've had the proposal several times over the years, and until now we've always supported the officer's recommendation to have what was described there as immersive training in London. And I think the first important point is to say we're not substituting something for something that's the same, because you heard from officers it will be different. It will be different because it is not the kind of immersive experience that we've had in the past. And I have in the past supported the recommendation of officers to have that form of immersive training, first of all, as a very important protection for the quasi trustees who serve on the pension fund. Because Councillor Henriksson's earlier question about training, that you must individually be able to say that you have done enough for people to be convinced that you understand the issues that are before you. And the intensive immersive training that we receive in London is a crucial part of that, in my view. Councillor Henriksson and others have mentioned the carbon footprint, and again, that is actually the other way. If the convener is correct in thinking that the 36 fund managers will come up as we've had, then that will be an extension of the carbon footprint. I mean, I don't believe that is all that important in this particular debate. If it's important that people understand what they are saying. I think that it could be said that we could have the immersive training in another environment. We could go to a hotel or something, or we could go to Edinburgh. What I have said in the past, and it came through something very clearly to me in the early times that I went on this training, is that in London, you're at the absolute heart of the things that we are concerned with in pension management. And I think that the sense that you get from that it makes a really big impact and is a very positive thing. I think from my past experience, I think strangely it may seem paradoxical, but it is harder to get quasi-trustees to attend the training in Aberdeen than to attend the immersive training, because you always have lots of other things to do. And I think if you look at the records, you'll find that the turnout has been lower than it has been for the all-in team training. I think that we set a great model for other pension funds and how we've involved both board members and the quasi-trustees in the training together. It has also been greatly effective in improving the links between the different members. And certainly I've enjoyed being with the councillors from the different political parties that we don't often have close contact. And I think that it's been very important in doing that for the cohesiveness that we need to guide the pension fund through what are going to be, I think, very difficult times. So I would strongly encourage people. You are not here representing your parties. You're here as quasi-trustees, responsible, yes, in every respect to the recipients of the pension in particular. And we must take that obligation. Yes, we bear in mind every single penny that's spent. But you heard the convener say that it's a material and a scale that we're dealing with. But what is not immaterial is the building up of knowledge and experience amongst the board members. So I would ask everybody personally, individually, to reflect on that and to bear that in mind in supporting the officer's recommendations. Thank you.
Councillor Stewart, do you want to come in to second?
Yes, please. Thank you, convener. I would be supporting and in terms of seconding the recommendation by the officer, as in the report. They are the ones that are actually experienced in this and have shown good practice in the achievements of the pension fund. I think we should go with what is actually laid down in front of us. I think it's very telling that when Laura Collis spoke earlier, and I actually wrote down some of the things that she said in terms of the relation to the training. She said there's an expectation to do the training. If we're not prepared to do the training, then we could be removed from the committee, that we will be held to account at some point. And I think that that's all, she's there doing all of the hard work to invest for this pension for the whole of the North East. And as you, in your own words, minimised the training by saying it's peanuts in relation to the whole amount of money, I think is quite a damning thing to say. I think it's important that we have this relationship with London and the fund managers there. We have no guarantee that they will actually come up to Aberdeen. I just think what you're proposing at a very early stage as someone new to convening this committee and the pension, I think you're making a radical change that I don't actually think is right, and perhaps is driven from a more personal party approach rather than the way we as individuals are appointed to this committee. I speak also as a housewife. I wouldn't waste a penny. Absolutely wouldn't waste a penny. And whilst I take on board that I wouldn't want to waste the money for training, I also know that you need to, from the pension fund, I also know that you need to actually invest appropriately, invest in people, invest in the knowledge so that we can act with good governance and diligence. And that's why I will be supporting the recommendation as laid out in the paper. And I have to say, convener, I've always held you in slightly higher esteem than some of your colleagues, but I'm very disappointed at the way at the beginning you want to speak to me like that. I would have thought, John, you could have just been a little bit better. But anyway, I've said my piece. Thank you very much. I'm seconding the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. I'm sorry to have disappointed you. Would anybody else like to come in? Councillor Malik?
Thanks very much, Kenneth. I very much echo what said by Councillor Crockett. And first time I'm experiencing, I'm councillor for the last 10 years, that convener moved his motion formally and did not bother to say a word that for the motion. We had officer, and also 4.1 financial application is clear that training costs will be met by the fund, and it will be almost nothing. It is very important training, but we had actually twice before amendment from a political group. I think this this committee is non-political. So why you are dragging politics in this committee? If you are obsessed with London, and I don't think this is the right way to move your motion against officer recommendation not to go to London, because if you are actually telling us, giving us a lecture that, oh, carbon footprint is very important, so 20 people going to London will make a big difference, and 36 coming from London or from various part of the UK to Aberdeen is acceptable for yourself. I think this training is very important, and our officers are actually with this training, and we must carry on, which we've been doing for many years. If you are going to arrange locally, what is guaranteed that all of the members, they will turn up here? And sometime we had actually once a meeting for training here from SSG, and then about 6 or 7 of our members didn't turn up for various reasons. They were busy for appointment with the dentist and doctor and picking up their children. And if you are away from Aberdeen to London, it's not a 1 hour or 2 hours training, it's 2 days training. And then you are there for 2 full days and you can learn a lot. I would be supporting an officer recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Mike. Anybody else want to come in? I'm not seeing any hands. Councillor Crockett, would you like to sum up?
I think it's all said, Convener.
Thank you, Councillor Crockett. I'll be very brief. The only thing that is different from the report in terms of my motion is simply that we'll do something in Aberdeen rather than doing the same thing in London. I have not, and I'm not, and will not minimise the minimise the importance of training. It's just where we do it. I used to work in the financial services sector. I had an office in London, and my other office was in Edinburgh, and there are financial services firms in different places. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, convener. The committee has before it a motion in the name of the convener, which has been circulated, which is to agree the recommendations with the exception that the proposed training session in London is held in Aberdeen instead, with fund managers either attending in person or providing training virtually. An amendment in the name of Councillor Crockett, which is to approve the recommendations as they're set out in the report. Just for clarification for our new members, it is only the committee that vote. The board doesn't have a vote on this matter. So, convener, if people could please vote motion or amendment. Convener.
Motion.
Vice convener.
Motion.
Councillor Alphonse.
Motion.
Councillor Clark.
Motion.
Councillor Crockett. Councillor Cross.
Amendment.
Councillor Davidson.
Motion.
Councillor Henrickson.
Motion.
Councillor Malik.
Amendment.
Councillor Massey.
Amendment.
Councillor McCrae.
Motion.
Councillor Stewart.
Amendment.
And Councillor Tissera.
Amendment.
That's 7 votes for the motion, convener 6 for the amendment. The motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. That now I think takes us to the private session, the exempt business. Have we got any